The AH-1Z Viper attack helicopter flies into the top tier of the American tech tree in War Thunder. Let's check it out. The AH-1Z Viper, sometimes called the Zulu Cobra, is currently the ultimate development of the original Bell AH-1 Cobra helicopter from all the way back in 1965. The original AH-1, which I'll cover in a dedicated review at some point, was in service for many years and was one of the first generation of dedicated attack helicopters. It was eventually upgraded to the AH-1W Super Cobra, which was different enough to really be a whole new version, and it added a second engine along with massive upgrades to the weapons system. The AH-1Z Viper goes even further. The Viper has a new four-bladed rotor system, further upgraded engines, a far more advanced weapon system, higher takeoff weight, and larger stub wings. Those last two combine to give the Viper a much larger supply of carried weapons and end up providing a little bit more versatility than previous models. Now, throughout the history of the AH-1 Cobra family, the U.S. Marine Corps has been a very enthusiastic user, and with the Viper, they're the primary operator of the type so far. The helicopter entered service with the Marines in the late 2000s, and thus far they're still the largest user with around 200 currently in use. There's been some interest from a few other countries in using the AH-1Z, and it's currently under consideration from half a dozen or so potential customers. It's worth mentioning that since this vehicle only became fully operational in 2010, that as of making this video, this is one of the most modern vehicles in War Thunder. What we get in the game is the AH-1Z, an attack helicopter in rank 7 of the American tech tree, with a battle rating of 10.7. The weapon system of the Viper is very capable, with an impressive array of features. It has night vision, thermal sights, a very good auto tracker, an 83x optical zoom, a radar warning receiver, a laser warning receiver, and a missile approach warning system. The only thing it doesn't have is any kind of built-in passive IR countermeasure system or dampening features, like a few of the Soviet helicopters, but its offensive systems are top-notch. Now, the weapon loadouts it gets are pretty typical of a high-tier helicopter. Entry-level unguided rockets for very low spawn points, or guided anti-tank missiles for a moderate number of spawn points. It can also carry sidewinders for air defense, and it has access to gun pods along with the chin-mounted minigun. The air-to-air missile it carries is the AIM-9L. This is a very high-performance, all-aspect infrared guided missile, with pretty respectable range. It ends up giving the AH-1Z the ability to attack not just other helicopters, but also low-flying aircraft with some level of success. Now, its primary air-to-ground weapon is the laser-guided AGM-114B Hellfire missile. This is a fairly capable weapon, but it's got some unique quirks. It has a ballistic flight trajectory, so most of the time it'll tend to fire up so it can cruise and attack its targets from above. That can help get better hits, but it seriously increases the flight time of the weapon. And if you're attacking a moving target with it, they might be able to get out of the way, pop smoke, or duck behind cover, even if they don't know they're under missile attack. I've also had a fair number of instances using the Hellfire, both on the Viper and other helicopters, where the target I was attacking was able to either get into cover or got blown up by something else before my shot finished flying. Now, since the Hellfire is laser-guided, you can also use it to attack other helicopters. And since you can take up to 16 of these things, it might end up being your primary all-around weapon. Other than the long travel time, the other main weakness is that some of the higher-end SAMs can outrange the Hellfire, so positioning will matter a little bit more than raw distance when you're setting up standoff missile attacks. On the upside, The Hellfire has pretty strong armor penetration and a 3 kilogram warhead, so if you can get a solid hit on something, it'll probably pop in 1 or 2 hits. The last thing to remember is the slow travel time again. If you find yourself in like a missile jousting contest with another helicopter where you're both shooting missiles at each other, you're probably gonna lose because the Hellfire is very slow. So keep that in mind and try to remember to duck out of the way. Now the flight performance of the AH-1Z is pretty good with very few holdups. The cyclic response is good, it has a strong collective with its 4-bladed rotor, and it's fully aerobatic. You can flip this thing around all over the place and still be able to recover most of the time. It's also pretty fast, and in my experience, it was reasonably effective at slowing down too, which is always a big asset for a helicopter. It also has an impressive ceiling height of over 5,000 meters. Not that you'd really ever have a reason to go up that high, though. The only real caveat I found is that rolling it past about 45 degrees can be a little dangerous, and it felt like the controls were a bit less responsive during steep banking. Flying the Viper out into ground battles isn't as flexible as I usually prefer, but that isn't the Viper's fault. At the top tier, player-controlled SPAA are generally pretty effective, and even one mildly competent SPAA unit can be enough to force you into long-range standoff missile attack gameplay. If you like to try and do the fast-paced, high-risk, like up-close brawling with helicopters, you might not get much opportunity, simply because the AH-1Z is quite fragile and it doesn't really withstand hits very well. Even low-caliber roof gun fire from enemy tanks can be enough to take this one down, and the vast majority of the time that I tried to fly this in for like a low-and-close rocket pass or something, I ended up getting shot down before I was anywhere close to the targets. To make matters worse, the Hydra rockets are pretty low impact, and the Viper's gun turret needs sustained fire to even beat up on very light targets. This basically forces you into the, standard helicopter meta of just trying to use standoff missiles from the edge of the battlefield. But luckily for you, the Viper's pretty good at that. The strong optical zoom, combined with the thermal sights, and the quantity of Hellfire missiles, gives this vehicle a pretty credible offensive punch. If you can get yourself into a good sneaky spot, it might be, pretty easy for you to rack up some decent number of kills with only a minimal amount of practice. Just remember that the Hellfires sometimes won't pop a tank in just one hit, so don't be afraid to launch 2 or 3 at a time. After all, you have plenty of ammo. Now in the PvE battle mode, the roll-and-wand SAMs can be a bit of an issue. But if you're careful, you can usually get a fair number of ground units racked up. Since you can, as of making this video anyway, reload the Hellfires in flight in PvE battles, you can literally just spam your missiles out on a cluster of targets, then fly to where you think the next batch is going to spawn, repeat the process for as long as you have the patience to keep going. Visually, the Viper looks like a pretty basic attack helicopter, but there are some obvious hints that it's a bit more modern. There's only one other custom paint job in the game, which isn't great, but you can find some good community-made stuff if you want. With its modified engine exhaust, really it's barely recognizable as an AH-1 when you're looking at it from behind, but in other angles the lineage is a little bit more obvious, and overall, I think it looks pretty good. Landing this one is very easy. You get landing skids, and the AH-1Z sticks pretty well on touchdown. Also, it's pretty effective at slowing down when you want to. This is really one of the few helicopters where I had no trouble at all landing without relying on the hover mode, and overall, it really has pretty great landing performance. To close out on the AH-1Z Viper. This helicopter has a great weapon system with thermals, a good zoom, and an auto tracker. It's reasonably fast, and it can carry a huge load of Hellfire missiles. However, it's not so great on defenses, and its chin-mounted minigun just doesn't hit as hard as some other helicopters' built-in cannons. The final verdict on the Zulu Cobra is that this is a great addition to top-tier American tank lineups, and if you want an alternative to using the Apache, the AH-1Z has you covered. It performs reasonably well in the current helicopter meta, and it can be highly effective with just a couple of practice missions, so long as you keep in mind that it's a bit of a glass cannon and it's easy to shoot down. As always, thanks for watching.